All right, we are live. Hello, welcome to the Max Revenue Show. I am your host, Max Revenue, aka Trey Shields, along with the Zen Master of Commercial Insurance, Micah Solis. Micah, how are you today?
Better than last week. How are you?
Good. Today's episode, we're going to do a little bit of rapid fire. For Micah, we're going to talk about drop offs, drop ins, what to drop off, how to do it. Um, Also had a question about leveraging underwriters. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? And then also, what everybody wants to know: how significant is the State Farm downgrade truly? And if you haven't heard of it, we will clue you in on the juicy deeps. So, without further delay, let's get into this. Micah, question number one.
I'm nervous.
I know. And all these questions I'm pulling from our producer community. Link will be in the show notes. Basically, we have a school community where we get in and share ideas, markets, all this different stuff. We have a lot of people ask us questions. Producers are getting in there, mixing it up, helping each other from all around the country. So if you feel like you're out on an island by yourself and you want to mix it up with some other people in your industry who are where you are or have been where you are right now, I highly recommend it. Link in the show notes. Okay. This is from, we'll call Matt. Was curious the Max Rev faithful have used or are using in any cold call drop in situations, things you have seen work or get attention. I have heard of people using benchmarking materials for a certain industry showing how a prospect matches up with their industry, but have not heard specifically what the material all shows. I'm open to suggestions on this and what people have found of value in this area. So we're
Good
talking
question.
drop ins.
Yeah, good question. Man, I used to make a living on drop-ins. That's all I did. The first 2.5 years I was an insurance marketing rep at Federated. So yeah, I'm very familiar with drop-ins. There's two different trains of thoughts on this. One is the traditional leave something of valuable information. Could be that benchmarking data, could be an industry report, it could be something like that. The other train of thought is to basically leave a pattern interrupt, right? Something that like breaks the mold and just stands out from everyone else so that when this business owner, person you're trying to get in touch with is like, holy cow, or they laugh or they're entertained. And I don't think either one is wrong. I think both used together can make a ton of sense. So let me just start with a shock and awe first so people know what I'm talking about. Like when I was at Federated, there was this guy who would leave a shoe, right? And he's like, happy to get my foot in the door, just hoping to get my foot in the door. Let's chat, right? And you're not using this on every single prospect. I think it's going to be used on your bigger prospects or the one you've been trying after for a long time. Um, so I think creative drops like that are really funny, can be effective. You know, it's hard. If I got something like that, I would be like, have a hard time if the guy called me as a follow up to be like, man, nah. Like, I'd be like, yeah, sure, I'll meet with you. So I think part of the problem with that, though, is then you're getting meetings also with people who are going to be like just taking it because they kind of, I don't want to say feel bad for you, but they're like, all right, I'll take the meeting, you know. And now in some people's minds, that would be, doesn't matter. You got the meeting. That's all you want. You want that opportunity to just speak, right? And to talk and interact. So if that's your whole goal with the drop, then maybe that's the way to go. If you haven't followed him, you can go follow Dale Dupree on LinkedIn. The guy, talks a lot about emotional, personal things as well, but he's huge on drops. He was a copier sales guy. He was the copier warrior, created a whole persona around it. I think it worked really well for him. He crushed it apparently. That's his whole method he teaches, like a crumpled letter, a donut box is empty. So I, for me personally, and maybe it's just because I'm lazy, I don't want to put that much effort into every single drop. And the only part with insurance is that there's so many like strong relationships. I feel like if you put that much into insurance, you're going to get I mean, half the people, 90% of the people you call anyways are just going to be happy or content. So it's like you're putting all this effort in, and the efficiency side of it, I get that it's more effort up front. He would say like, hey, numbers wise, you don't need a whole lot of wins. You just need a few to get through the door, and it's quality over quantity. But insurance is just a unique animal in that, and you had a post on this last week, but it's just a unique animal because it's not even like copiers, right? It's just different. So anyways, check him out. I'm a fan of what he does. I'm a fan of creative drops. Um, and that's kind of my take on the creative drop stuff. I haven't done a ton of it, mainly because it's not really my personality. Now on the value piece, what I typically do is I would look for like an article really short and just highlight a couple paragraphs and leave a handwritten note. Um, now what I've been doing, this is kind of cheating, I guess you could say, but I wrote a book, right? I did it strategically. It doesn't tout me or anything. It just literally it's a non-biased view, the business insurance playbook on how I would buy insurance if I was a buyer. And so it's a 30-minute read, but I've won 2 deals that I would attribute 100% to that here in the last month. And the book's only been out a year. I knew it would take about a year to start to get traction. But both times the buyers were like, hey, I read your first chapter of your book. I really liked it. So I figured I would meet with you, kind of, and then in their minds, they see me as like this author, this, guy who knows all this stuff. Sure, I know a little bit, but I'm not probably nearly as smart as they think I am. So anyways, that's kind of what I've been doing now is the drops. And then one little caveat, I'll let you chime in. Um, doing drops is very inefficient use of time, but I think it's a good way to mix things up. I think it's a good way to get through to prospects you've never seen before. I think it's a good way to stay sane. Sometimes just being on the phones in front of a computer can just be like, you feel disconnected. I think getting out there, in the trenches physically can do something good for you. But one form of drops that I think is kind of cool is you can kind of do a Amazon style drop, right? So you don't have to go there in person, but you kind of have the impact of a drop. And this is where you can leave a creative thing, or you can just, like for me, I send my book, right? If I talk to a prospect or I can't get through to someone, I'll send a copy of my book, and I can send it as a gift and put a little note there, and then start following up after that. So that's kind of my thoughts on the whole on the drops. The only thing is I wouldn't do is don't leave a ton of company material, just like stuff, commercials. Like that's not really gonna do a ton. Um, so uh, yeah, your thoughts?
Yeah, nobody cares about your super cool branded folder with your logo and whatever infinite possibilities or whatever that stupid shit is. Nobody cares. No, a couple of things. So, two things. Number one, it's not cheating when you write a book, like you said. It's actually just playing the game at a higher level. So you're not cheating. There's just levels, as I think Drake would say. Is that Drake? Levels? Come on, I know you're
Is
Mr.
it
Hip
is
Hop.
it is it P Diddy or
P Diddley.
too
My
soon?
dog is My man is gone. He said, "I'm out of here." Anyways, if you
As
don't
he
know what we're
should
talking
be.
about, Google it. Google P Diddley. Anyways, and then secondly, I guess my main thing that I really wanted to drive home about the drop offs is just don't do Krispy Kreme donuts. And I'm going to tell you why. Because I was doing drop offs during COVID, and I had probably 8 dozen donuts, and we were driving around dropping stuff, dropping whatever. And I think probably half of the people weren't in the office that day. And so if there are 4 or 5 dozen Krispy Kreme glazed donuts that are just sitting in my car with the smell wafting as I'm driving, I
I
ate
see
four
where this
dozen
is going.
donuts. I ate 4 dozen donuts that day.
That's
and
awesome.
and I always do drop-ins with one of my office buddies just because we like to mix it up. So
Yep.
somebody drives, the other one hops out, right? And so the donuts are back there, and I'm like, I start reaching back and eating them. And he's like, dude, how many? Like, by the end of the day, there was like, I swear to God, I ate 40 donuts. Felt awful. So obviously, I'm joking, but the thing that
Yeah.
I really like that you said about that you were talking about drop-ins is y'all would do the little cards with your face on it.
Called the face cards. Creative.
Yeah. Uh, yeah. So I really like that, and I've been kind of farting around with it, trying to design one. And although I'm not a fan of you leaving like your company's logo or like overly logoed stuff, I do think there's a lot of value to having your face on something so people can begin to see you eyeball to eyeball. Uh, Even if you have a face made for radio like me, I think it's still worth, having something. And then the last thing I'll say on drop-ins is like, man, if you haven't done them before, they're just not nearly as scary as you probably think they are. They're really not. It's it's just not really that big of a deal. You just walk in, ask for the business owner, and if they're there, you just have a quick conversation. Hey, man, was you ever open to a conversation about your insurance? It's like literally just like a cold call. It's just face to face. It is not. It's not scary.
Well, and if you bring something of value, it's not even like, hey, I want to see if you have a meeting sometime. It's literally, hey, I wanted to just stop by. I thought you'd find some value in this information or this book I wrote, or, I thought you'd be interested to see how your peers are, what they're paying. Here you go. And then they might just it's like that reciprocity, I think, law or something, like people just feel obligated. Like they'll start talking to you because they kind of feel awkward just taking something that you're giving them. So that's a kind of a cool part of it. It's like you're giving, if you go into a mindset of a giver, go giver, right? Classic book that I still haven't read, but I think I know the concept.
Well, only you would quote a book you've never read.
Yeah. Well, hey, man, I like the concept, right? Give first, and then people are just going to kind of feel like naturally inclined to want to talk to you. One cool note on drops I would talk about, and then I'll let you chime back in or go to the next question is, if you cold call someone and let's say they're super busy or hectic and they're like an office manager, controller, whatever. This has worked well for me a couple of times. I've done it. I get a little $10 Starbucks gift card and I'll get like 5 or 10 of them, right? And do drops with those. But one of the things to the busy people, like, hey, I know you're swamped with work and you said to call you back in 4 months. Just was in the thought you'd enjoy a coffee, because it's end of first quarter, whatever. And that's never been received poorly. So, yeah.
I mean, who's going to turn down free coffee?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So this is the question number 2 is from my boy James. I believe James is in Canada, and so the funny thing is oh my. So he he uses the word y'all in his question, but he spells it with an H. It's hey y'all, YHALL. It's hilarious.
Interesting.
Typical Canuck. Hey y'all, question for you, especially if there are any past underwriters in the group. Would you ever share quoted terms from underwriters with other underwriters in order to leverage them against each other for your insured? Bad practice or okay? Question mark. What are your thoughts?
He's trying to get someone in trouble.
Do you want me to go first? I'll go first so you don't get in trouble.
No, I won't get in trouble. I'm not in marketing. I'm a producer. So the textbook answer would be you don't ever show, because put yourself in that person's shoes, right? You'd be pissed if you're an underwriter trying to work hard and then you literally take the new pricing, show it to the current guy to give him a last look, and he just undercuts it and the client stays there. I can tell you that happens a lot. At every agency I've worked at, every marketing person who lies through their teeth when they say they won't do that because they kind of do it. I've seen some be more egregious with it than others. I think your job is to always do what's best for the client. But if you keep burning those relationships with underwriters, eventually you're not going to be able to do your best job for the client. I personally, if I was in marketing, what I would like to do is come out and say, here's the expiring. Everyone has the expiring. Just come with your best. And then to the incumbent, I would say, I got 3 or 4 people looking at this. The client's very happy with you. However, I got to do my job and the client wants to see what's out there in the market. Sharpen your pencil this year. So I'd give them I'd let them know. And then I would say, hey, if someone is extremely less where I think the client would move for it, I will not necessarily show you their pricing, but I will just come back and tell you and say, hey, you are just significantly higher. And if you want to relook at this, go for it. I think that's, to me, I feel the best about that because I'm not screwing over the underwriter that's trying to work hard for the business. Now of course, if the incumbent is hated by the client and all that stuff, that kind of goes out the window. It's like, okay, then play that whole game. But if you have good relationships with both, client's happy with the current, but kind of just wanted to look, that's how I would do it. And I kind of feel good about that because I'm not lying to anyone. I'm just being forthright. I don't know what your thoughts are, but
No, I think that's dead on. I don't think I have anything great to add to that. I know we hate this expression, or at least I do, because it tends to get overplayed, but it is about relationships. And if I've got a underwriter that busts his butt for me and has saved my ass, I will absolutely throw him a bone if I have to. Especially if he's going up against somebody who is always notoriously difficult to work with or whatever. I'm not going to do anything that's going to ruin an appointment or ruin a relationship. But if I've got a guy who's actively going out of his or girl going out of his way to help me win new business and we're on a roll together, I will absolutely tip the scales in his favor. Now, I'm never not going to present another underwriter's quote because it's less. And I have had that before where I literally had an underwriter say, "Well, just don't show him that quote." And I was like, "Are you serious?
terrible.
I don't want to go to jail. I don't want to go to jail." But anyways, yes. So that's all I got on that.
I would add to that, to your point, is present. Here's what you can do if you're like, I don't want to give the guy the last look, but I don't know what to do. What I've done before, and this actually has worked well, take the pressure off me. I do my job as the broker and the media, basically the middleman. I present the incumbent who's 25% higher, and then I present the low ball offer. Look through them all, talk about coverage differences, and then I go to the client. I say, hey, this is the beautiful part if you can work out ahead. Here's the two options we got that are the best. Here's your incumbent. And they're like, man, I really like the carrier. And I'll say, hey, here's the deal, client. I can go back and we can play the game if you want to try to pit up and get this guy to drop his price, or I'm just putting the ball in your court. That way, when I talk to both underwriters, I'm not screwing anybody over. Again, I presented the offers they gave me. I'm sharing them with the client. I let the client decide if they want me to go back and play that game, and then I'll play the game. And that actually worked really well a couple times. I've had to do that.
All right, let's do question 3. This is from our boy Daniel. You know who Daniel is. Last name B. I think you remember him. He's been long-time listener, long-time follower. Shout out to Daniel. State Farm downgrade AM Best to a B. How big is the news considering it's only their division that writes homeowners insurance?
Yeah. And I
thought
actually
it was commercial too, actually. I don't think that's...
Well, in California, that division writes some commercial, I think. In other states, it really doesn't. They have all these insurance companies got 30 different subsidiaries and all that stuff to kind of protect themselves. And I made the mistake. I'll address it here. I put a LinkedIn video out because I saw the news, but my very first thought was is this State Farm, all of State Farm? And from a lot of the articles, I couldn't really get a lot of clarity. And my thought is I have a client who literally has a State Farm auto policy because it was just dirt cheap. And it was that's the way it was written before I took him over. He has 40 trucks. And my first thought is the umbrella won't sit over this thing if it's B-rated paper, right? And so I put a post out on LinkedIn and then I actually just deleted it. It had really good traction. And then some guy commented and added clarity to it. I wish I could remember his name, about it only being really the California division. And I was like, yeah, that's a good point. I'm just going to delete the video because I didn't want to necessarily be like a fear monger. And I wasn't trying to be. I was just trying to say, hey, if you're with State Farm, make sure you talk with an agent because your umbrella is not going to sit over the top of this. But that really only pertains to if you're in California. So I just deleted the video because now, in my opinion, I don't think it's that big of a deal at this moment. Now, I think it should cause some forward thinking about things and wow, okay, this is just one California division, but and they've been dirt cheap here in Texas, on auto. And I know a lot of carriers are cheap, got in the market, and you got to give it those 4 or 5 years, and all of a sudden they're out. And so if they, I don't know, just looking ahead, I could see something happening here in Texas in the next 1 to 2 years. So that's kind of my thinking on it. I don't know, you seem like you have some thoughts on it.
Yeah, I've run up against them a few times, and their auto and excess is the most absurd thing I've ever seen. And how they can stay profitable. There's no way they're profitable. At least on the commercial auto and excess, I have no idea how they do it. Everybody else in my state, just depending on the vehicle, let's say it's a contractor running, F-350s or whatever, F-250s, it might be anywhere from $6,000 to $10,000, and they're writing it for, $1,000. I just have no idea how they're doing it. I really don't. I don't know if they lump it all in with their homeowners and auto, and then it just kind of I don't know. But I've seen too many carriers come in and out of this state, and I know where they were writing things. I don't know how they're possibly staying in the black. I think this is just a sign of things to come, personally. I mean, the numbers are the numbers. There's a catch somewhere, and we're not seeing what it is. But the way they underwrite these risks is freaking insane.
Mm-hmm.
And so, anyways,
it brings up a good point. When this whole thing happened, I called my wholesale broker that was on the excess of that client I was talking about. And this is actually really important for all of us to understand listening. Insurance, and he brought this up. I was like, you're spot on, dude. So he's going through a renewal right now where the company literally has one option for insurance in the E&S market. They've had 3 or 4 major claims. They screwed up, or these whatever, their work they were doing, screwed it up so bad. And he was like, dude, in the past, even 4 or 5 years ago, these really bad performing risks wouldn't really be that penalized. Sure, they're in the risk pool like all people are, but they would maybe pay 25, 30% more than their competitors. They're the really good performing people. Well, now it's getting to the point where it's like you can't even, it's not that you're going to be paying 25% more. It could be 200% more, 300, they're getting really, the market's getting better, but the poor performers are getting essentially, underwriters, like, if you want to buy insurance, you're going to have to pay 4x what you were normally paying. And so this company went back to the agent, was like, dude, we can't even stay in business to pay these premiums. We can't afford to pay these premiums. And so my friend at the wholesale broker was like, dude, insurance, he's like, I think that's what people are going to start seeing. Like, risk management is vital. We've always said this, right? But I think it's kind of been like this. Like, well, I can always get insurance, right? If I have a claim or two, I'll still be able to get insurance somewhere. That might start changing. Like, there literally might be companies that start going out of business if you have not one claim, but if you start to have the multiples, or it might just, the cost of just paying that premium might just become so prohibitive of not just, and we've kind of seen this in the trucking space, right? And that's for even decent performers. But if you're a poor performing trucking risk, I don't know if you can afford trucking insurance, right? In certain states, at least. And if you're not doing the right risk management stuff, and if you haven't have a track record of showing progress. So I just thought it was interesting along the lines of the State Farm topic. For everyone out there, if you're talking with clients, make sure you're stressing this and having conversations around this. Like, hey, this is what I'm seeing in the market. If you poor performing risks are starting to get dinged big time. It used to be a minor ding, now it's major, and it's basically can put people out of business. So take it serious. I know we always talk about work comp and getting your mod over one, but I'm just talking GL, everything. Like, you got to be mindful of who you're hiring, the practices you're putting in place. And when you're listening and if you're talking about this stuff, hopefully you're working this into your conversations around insurance. I always like the old slogan I heard, like, insurance is just one piece of the pie, right? It's like, you got risk management overall. Insurance is just one piece. That's a tool to say, hey, I don't want this risk anymore. I'm going to transfer it because I can't afford to take on that, or whatever. Everything else isn't addressed, though. Risk management, and all the other stuff. And that's, as an advisor, that's how you can separate yourself. So, anyways, I'll get off the soapbox.
Let's do a bonus question.
Okay.
One more. This is a good one. This is from AJ inside the community. Titled Stuck Prospects. I understand that this is a broad topic of discussion, but what are some of the best practices you found to keep prospects engaged? I have had several quality first appointments where there was a mutually agreed upon next step to do an independent analysis, due diligence of their company's specific data, and then boom, zero dark 30. Should I do drop-ins, emails, touch base, calls? I absolutely despise the, hey, I'm just following up talk track. It's low status in my mind. Tell me what you think.
Well, I actually just addressed this on our Diary of a New Producer series, I think a week or two ago, because Ian was having the same problem where he's set several meetings, has a good first meeting, and then it kind of just goes nowhere. Like they, and so what I told him is, and you might not like this answer, but I think there's a couple different things. First of all, you got to look at who are you meeting with? Are you meeting with the actual decision maker, right? Because if you're not, that's probably your first problem. A guy reached out on LinkedIn and asked me that same question, um, and he was like, I'm meeting with this person and this lady and this office manager. Once he said the word office manager, I was like, dude, I'm not saying those people can't be the decision maker, but if they're holding you up, then they're truly not the decision maker, or there's a problem, right? And so you got to look at who you're meeting with. The second point I want to make is like you can't convert people. You know what I mean? You can't twist people's arms and make them do things they don't want to do. Either in that first meeting you didn't dissect enough pain or uncover enough pain, and those people are just being nice and kind of saying, "Yeah, sure," because people are non-confrontational by human nature. We don't want to tell people no, most of us. We don't want to let people down. We want to at least kind of just, I'm not going to ruffle feathers. I'll just tell the guy, yeah, but then I'll probably like put it on the back burner and get around to it the next couple of months. I'm busy. And so you're fighting against that. And I always say complacency is our number one competitor. And so to the guy who sent us this message, those are a couple of things. First of all, I would check, right? And maybe you look at your first meeting, and I don't know if you're using our script, but you really got to be, and our script is not a script, it's a framework. You're, the first meeting, if you're not uncovering any pain at all, like as you're talking to them and explaining things and asking questions, even if they agree, I mean, it's going to be kind of a tough battle, right? And I'm still firm believer in doing the due diligence because you uncover things throughout that process, but it's going to be a little bit tougher. So I guess saying all that to answer the question, how do you get them unstuck? Man, I think you just stay in touch, and you don't want to become that pesky person that's following up every week, but you got to still be persistent. And if I get to this stage, I told Ian, I don't really feel like I don't feel any shame or guilt following up like crazy with that person because they told me, hey, I will get you this stuff. Now, it doesn't mean I'm calling them every day, but I will pretty much reach out weekly until I get it resolved, because they asked me to, right? And I give them outs throughout that. I'm like, hey, after 3-4 attempts, I'm like, hey, I don't know if something changed. Just let me know. No big deal. And I know people say, hey, I'm too good to say just following up, but sometimes I think we overcomplicate the sales process too. It's like, dude, you don't have to try to add value and like, oh, here's this article. It's like all that stuff is essentially putting up a front because you are just following up, right? You just want to know like, hey, where are things at? What's your timeline for moving forward? Has something changed? So why not just be direct and be like, whatever just happened to being honest? And honesty gets such a bad rap. It kind of annoys me. It's like, you know, people poo-poo on cold calling. They poo-poo on following up because they're like, it's so low status. It's like, dude, it's not really low status. It's just being forthright. You go to a networking event, you want to meet someone, you're just hoping that they introduce you to someone else. You're all just in it for you. So you're really being so freaking selfish. Where the cold caller is being like just direct and honest. You're being manipulative, secretive, and whatever. And even on your follow-ups, not saying you, the listener, are being this way, but subconsciously maybe you are. You're like, I got to provide value. I got to do that. It's like, dude, just follow up with the person, man. Like, give them a call. You're following up. They met with you. They agreed. That's all you got to. That's all you got to do. Don't overthink it. I don't know. Am I being too harsh?
No, I was thinking the same thing. I was thinking that the question kind of has this false premise underlying it, meaning that like you can actually convert the guy. That if you
Yeah.
if you just say the right thing or you do the right thing, then like you can get this guy off the fence. And while I do think there is some truth to it, right? Like you don't like at the end of the day, I think if we are always trying to convert people who are not ready to be converted, we're just going to basically be banging our head against the wall. And that really, if we just have a pipeline that's big enough, then we will have people who are truly in pain and ready to make a decision now. I think
Mhm.
I think I would be willing to bet that the majority of the people who ask a question like this, and not you, AJ, because I know it's not you, but I think most of the time when we ask a question like that, it's because we actually just stuff in the hopper behind it. And so we live and die by that deal. Like, oh, I just need to move these guys forward. And it's like, do you though? You know what I mean? Like somebody out there needs help. Why don't you just go find them?
Yep.
And but it's this is a bitter pill. And then I'll just give this example, and maybe this makes some sense. So I went last week to a bodybuilding trainer. I'm no bodybuilder, uh, but this guy does work with people like on their diet. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went and saw this guy, and he put me through this body fat test, and we went through this analysis of my eating patterns and all this stuff. And basically, I know what it is. It's just a funnel to get me down to a private coaching, you know, a
Right.
diet coaching for strength training. And by the end of it, he was like, all right, so here's what we can do. And he basically said, I think we should get you on some private coaching for diet. And I think we should get you on some private coaching for your lifts. I immediately kiboshed the lifts. I was like, no, nobody is following me around in the gym telling me what to do. I said, no offense. I've seen your trainers. I'm stronger than all of them. They're not going to tell me what to do, but I do need help with the food. So I'm happy to look into that. And he's like, so you think you'd be willing to do it? And I was like, yeah, I think it's something that I'd probably like to do. Now, take me out of the situation. I go back home. I sleep on it for a couple of days. I change my mind. I'm like, no, for the price, what he said, like I just
It's
kind of
not
came
worth
to
it.
this thing where it's just I don't think it's for me. I'm just not ready yet. The guy sends me a text message, like a good salesman, follows up and says, "Hey, are you ready to move forward with the diet coaching?" And I said, "Not right now." And I think this is kind of like an example of us in the producer thing. Is like we go in and we have this great meeting, and while they're in there and they're in our, you know, sales process and ecosystem, it makes, they're like, oh, that's not a bad idea, blah, blah, blah. And then they go back and they think about it and they're like, you know what? I'm just not ready yet. Or, you know what? I don't think this is for me. And a lot of times they don't give us a hard no or I change my mind. They just kind of leave the door cracked because they don't really want to say no. And we
Mm-hmm.
just keep following up and pushing and pushing and pushing. Um, when in reality, we should probably just go find somebody else who does need help and then just keep them on some type of follow up cam. Just drip on them once a quarter. You know what I mean? And it's the same thing. Like it's like what I see with most new producers, especially when I was in an office with a bunch of new producers. We were all in a bullpen, and like somebody would get somebody on the line, and by God, they would ride that thing. At every sales meeting, you'd hear about XYZ. Oh, XYZ Plumbing said this. The next sales meeting, XYZ Plumbing. Oh, my phone's ringing. And I just remember being like, bro, you've been talking about XYZ Plumbing for 6 months. Like, clearly it's not going to happen. Like, let's move on to something else. But it's like, no, they're going to live and die by that. Because at the end of it, the root of it is they just really didn't want to pick up the phone and call somebody else. They wanted to convert that because to them, that was the easier, softer way than picking up the phone.
That's a really good story. That's a great analogy, actually, perfect for this situation. And you know what I was going to ask, so it made me wonder, and this is a question for anyone in insurance, I think, especially, I think it'd be maybe low ticket purchases or if you're going for BOR, but okay, the classic sales training is in that scenario, your trainer you were meeting with or the sales guy, the owner, he said, hey, are you ready to move forward now or should we get you started now? What if he would have said, hey, I know this is a lot to think about. I don't want you to make a decision today. Just sleep on it. Let's talk Monday. Would you have been more apt, do you think, to actually move forward rather than going for a close on the spot?
No, it wasn't how it wasn't. It wasn't. It was a very low pressure.
Okay.
It was very much like our process.
Yeah.
It was like just he was giving, 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 and it was like, hey, here's what I think would help you. What are your thoughts? It
Gotcha.
was
So
very low pressure. It was not. It was.
you just didn't
It
have the
was. He
pain.
wasn't.
Your pain's just not great enough, like in that area for what he's trying to help with.
And the resources or the
Solution.
risk man solution just I already knew how to do it. You know what I mean? It was basically going to be a hand holding thing. And I'm just not ready to pay the money yet for somebody to handhold because I'm still convinced I can do it by myself.
It's like everyone
Which,
listening that doesn't buy our course. We've had how many 8,000 people come check out the course page and like we get a 6% conversion rate. You know, like I don't think it's been 8,000, but we've had a lot of people come look at the course, and it's like everything. Majority will come look at. They're kind of curious, just like you were. They know they want some help. They have a problem, but the problem's either not great enough or the solution's not great enough, and they think ultimately I can just do this on myself, or I'm too busy with other stuff. But it's the same thing for our
mm-hmm.
prospects.
I like that shameless plug there. That was impressive.
Uh,
Um, all right, we are getting to the end of our time here. Is there anything else that popped up this week that you found interesting that you wanted to share, or anything that going down in the Solace household that we need to be aware of?
no, there's something that we talked about with Ian, I think, in the power of kind of shadowing and we talked about like kind of being a disciple of someone who's doing it right in terms of sales and how that can help. And it's hard to be a disciple or a follower virtually over the phone once a week. And so,
Yep.
but I don't know if we have time to really get into all that. Maybe that's a topic for another day. But if you're listening and you're a younger producer, all I would encourage you to do is get in. Even if your company's very hands off and says you don't have to come to the office, whatever, try to find as much time as possible and just be very assertive. Even if you have to work remote and there's a guy you really like and he's 3 hours away or an hour away, dude, like be like, hey man, can we talk once a week? Can I text you? Like reach out to him, even if you have a set meeting once a week in the week. Call him about every little thing that pops up. Pick his brain. Just text. Try to get ingrained, and I think it'll help a lot. So that's all I would end on.
I have one more little nugget, and then we'll sign off. I put a post up on it the other day, and it was basically just talking about. It took me 5 years to get real momentum in this business. I've seen it take, some people it takes 2 or 3, some people it takes more than that. But it's like I'm in my 6th year now, and I have people stopping me on the elevator. Like this was last week. This guy stops me on the elevator because he hears me talking about with an underwriter, and he's like, "You're in insurance," and I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, I have this problem, blah 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 blah," or having somebody call me, or I got invited to go in and speak to this commercial real estate brokerage this afternoon, networking type deal, which I'm not a big networker, but just all these little momentum things that it's just like uh, it just time just takes time, and there's
Yep.
things we can do to speed that up with cold prospecting, and we can definitely artificially increase our supply and demand as a producer. Um, but there is just an element of time, and if you are new and you're out there and you're banging your head against the wall, this the spoils go to those who can outlast. So just find a way to stay in the game and keep trucking along, because eventually all of those lines that you have out in the water, they will eventually start to get nibbles. But you just got to keep your line in the water and as many lines in the water as possible in order to start seeing what you want to see. So
That's a uh, that's a really good point. And I was just talking about that with someone else. I don't know if it was my wife last week, but I was like, dude, because now I'm 37 or 38. Shoot, yeah, I'm 38. Uh, but I've been doing this 13 years and been in Texas 10 years. But it's like now I'm starting to kind of get some of that. Just a client who had never worked, a prospect in the past reaches out, or like you said, just kind of people know you're in the industry and like, hey, you should talk to so and so. Now I can never bank on that stuff, but it's just all those things make it a little bit easier when you stick with it and if you stick in it. So that's why your first couple of years are so difficult. You have no extra little kind of like bonuses that just drop out of the sky. But
right.
once you've been doing it, I'd say, like you said, 5, 6, 7 years, you start to have there's those little things that happen if you do a good job. And but again, I would say I'm still not at the point now where I can bank on that stuff for a steady flow of like success. But they're very nice to get.
Here's a little interesting nugget, dovetailing off what you just said. Is I am currently writing our first book, and
The
so one
cover
of the
is
things we
awesome,
talked
by the
about.
way.
Oh, you like that?
The title and cover.
I'm thinking, so I'm working through stuff, and Mike and I are talking, and it's like, who's our avatar, who we going after, and I'm inclined to say new producers. And Mike is like, no, it's everybody. It's anybody who's growth minded. It's not just new producers. It's, even producers who have been in the game for a long time, but maybe they're not where they want to be, or maybe they changed agencies and they need to rev it up again, or maybe they just sat back on their laurels and they lost a chunk of, lost a chunk of revenue, and they need to get, back in the mix. And so you, going off what we just said, you are a perfect example of that, where it would be easy right now for me to almost take my foot off the gas a little bit, because things are starting to come to me, not a lot, but starting to see traction, right? So it would be easy to kind of let my foot off the gas and just kind of cruise. But when I look at you talking about things continue to compound, you've really never taken your foot off the gas. So now 10 years in, this compounding of you making your calls no matter what, the deals that you have coming your way, like your snowball is just that much bigger than mine. You know what I'm saying? The amount of revenue that you've written already this year is just ridiculous. And it's because you've never taken your foot off the gas. And I think that we find a little success, we back off, and then we're going to come to a point where we realize we have to rev it up again. But if you just never take your foot off the gas, you can literally just keep that momentum compounding over and over and over. I think you'd probably, what you're doing right now is no more or less work than you were doing at Marsh. You just have 10 years of wind in your sails behind you. So now, whereas a big year was 150, 200 at Marsh, I don't want to say your number, but it's considerably bigger than that. You know what I mean? Just because you've just continued to let it compound. So whether you're a new producer or an experienced producer or whatever, if I can, for whatever it's worth, just always keep one foot in acting, and that snowball will just continue to compound on itself and get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then 75 a year turns into 125 a year, 125 a year turns into 250, 250 turns into 500. And then, before you know it, there's guys we know that do $1 million plus a year in revenue, which is just fucking retarded. So
Yeah,
that's my parting nugget.
Mic drop. And on that one.
It's like Warren Buffett says, right? It's not timing the market, it's time in the market. That's what he says. Boom.
No,
Pin drop, baby. All right. With that, we will bid you adieu. Hope you have a hell of a week. Producer Playbook is in the show notes. If you thought the questions that we had were interesting and you want to get in and mix it up with 500 plus producers from around, check out our school community. The link is also in the show notes. And then if you just hate people altogether and you just don't want to do any of that stuff and you just want to listen to Micah rant on YouTube, that link is also in the show notes. Feel free to go do that. I actually probably think YouTube, your stuff you put out on our YouTube channel is probably the most valuable of anything we do, and probably the least utilized. So go check that out.
Yep, we're over 500 subs now, so thank you to everyone that has subbed, and let's get to 1,000.
All right, guys, y'all have a great week, and we'll catch you next Monday.
Adios.
Adios.